Red Tails, directed by Anthony Hemingway, follows the exploits of the 332nd Fire Group, the first black fighter pilots to serve in the United States Air Force during World War II. While many people at the time believed that black men did not possess the skills or intelligence to become fighter pilots, the men of the 332nd Fire Group, better known today as the Tuskegee Airmen, surpassed all expectations, flying over 1,000 missions, shooting down 112 enemy airplanes, and earning 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses. While the achievements of the 332nd unfortunately faded out of public consciousness after the war ended in 1945, during the 90s, their story experienced a resurgence, leading to the development of a TV movie in 1995 and Red Tails in 2012. But is the film an accurate representation of their legacy? The film begins in Italy, where the members of the 332nd Flying Group are kept busy flying non-combative missions behind enemy lines. Though the pilots are anxious for a real combat mission, it seems that their time in the Air Force may be coming to an end, as one of their superiors, Colonel William Mortimus, has filed a report challenging the group's capabilities and suggesting that they be dissolved, while the group's commanding officer, Colonel A.J. Bullard, argues that his team's low kill count owes more to their lack of combat experience than an absence of ability. His superiors decide to issue an investigation into the operations of the 332nd. Angered by their lack of support, Bullard enlists the help of a friend and fellow colonel to get his team assigned their first real combat mission, providing air cover for an Allied landing at Nettuno Beach in Italy. Surprising no one but their naysayers, the 332nd perform incredibly well, shooting down 8 enemy aircraft, destroying a German aerodrome, and sustaining only one casualty, a young pilot named Ray Gannon. Having earned the confidence of their superiors, the 332nd are reassigned to serve as bomber escorts, though this turns out to be a mixed blessing, as while they succeed in sinking an enemy warship, the mission ends in tragedy when Ray, still injured from the last battle, is shot down and captured by German soldiers. Still reeling from the loss of their comrade, the 332nd are surprised to discover that their success in the air has improved their reputation among the white officers, who defy convention by offering to buy them a drink at the segregated officers club. Now in Stalag 18, Lieutenant Ray Gannon is understandably terrified at being the only black officer in a prison full of white airmen, though the other inmates are surprisingly accepting of the new arrival, offering him protection in exchange for helping them with their escape plan. Back in Italy, the 332nd were preparing to undertake their most dangerous mission yet, escorting a team of bombers during the first American air offensive over Berlin. Though despite losing their best pilot during the battle, the 332nd were able to complete their mission, earning a distinguished unit citation and renewing their conviction to fight for freedom and their rights as American citizens. Now, the question is, how much of this is actually true? The quote at the beginning of the film is most likely taken from a study called The Use of Negro Manpower in War, which was commissioned by the War Department in 1925 to help determine if African Americans were suited to serve in the armed forces. Though the paper was racist and poorly researched, describing black soldiers as cowardly and unintelligent, and failing to recognize the achievements of African American soldiers who served with the foreign armies, it didn't completely dismiss the possibility of recruiting black soldiers, as long as they served in segregated units and primarily performed manual labor. But despite this report and the War Department's reluctance to employ black pilots, in 1939, a series of black colleges and 2 black training schools were incorporated into the civilian pilot training program, which trained civilian pilots to serve in the armed forces. Colonel Mortimus is most likely based on Colonel William Momeyer, the commander of the 33rd Fire Group, who, just like his film counterpart, wrote a negative report about the Tuskegee Airmen, recommending that they be reassigned to a non-combative role. Though unsubstantiated, his report casts serious doubt on the Tuskegee Airmen and their ability to operate in the field, leading the War Department to conduct an official investigation comparing their performance to other airmen operating in the Mediterranean. To Momeyer's surprise, however, the report concluded that they were a superb tactical fire unit, confirming the group's potential and bolstering their reputation. Colonel Bullard also shares some features in common with Colonel Benjamin O. Davis Jr., the commander of the 332nd Fire Group. Davis, like Bullard, was a strong advocate for his men, speaking out against Momeyer's report during a hearing with the War Department in October of 1943. Though, unlike his film counterpart, Davis would not be promoted to the rank of colonel until several months after the hearing in January of 1944. The 332nd Fire Group began painting the tails of their aircraft red in June of 1944. The bright shade of paint, called insignia red, aided identification during dogfights and escort missions, and led to the development of the group's nickname, the Red Tails. Despite the obvious prejudice that existed in the War Department during the 1940s, the 332nd was awarded a Distinguished Unit Citation in 1945 after successfully completing an escort mission over Berlin. Though the circumstances surrounding this event differ slightly from how they're depicted in the film, a fact which I plan to expand on in the next section. While a few characters, like Bullard and Mortimus, share at least a passing similarity to real historical figures, the rest of the cast are basically fictional, which, given how much time I spend with them, is one of the main reasons why this video is so short. What the film fails to convey is that the 332nd Fire Group was actually composed of 4 fighter squadrons: the 99th, 100th, 301st, and 302nd. But because black airmen could only receive training at the Tuskegee Institute, it took a considerable amount of time to train enough pilots to occupy an entire fire group. Because of this, the 99th Fire Squadron, composed of the Institute's first group of graduates, was sent to the front several months before the other airmen, arriving in North Africa in April of 1943. Without a fire group of their own, the 99th spent the first few months of their deployment being shuffled between 4 white fire groups. Though, despite the military's misgivings about integration, the 99th got along reasonably well with the white pilots and their commanders, with the exception of Colonel William Momeyer, who, as previously stated, wrote a very damning report about the group's performance. Many of the battles depicted in the film have a fair share of historical inaccuracies. For instance, the Allied landing at Natuna Beach on February 5th, 1944 was not the 332nd's first combat mission, but was instead one of the last missions completed by the 99th before they officially joined the 332nd on April 1st, 1944. Though it is true that the 99th received 8 kills during the engagement. Also, while the 332nd did receive a Distinguished Unit Citation after completing an escort mission over Berlin in 1945, this occurred over a year after the American Air Force staged its first air offensive in the area on March 6, 1944. There's also no record of anyone from the 332nd destroying a German aerodrome by themselves or escaping from a prisoner of war camp, though black prisoners of war were not that uncommon, as 32 black airmen were taken captive before the war ended in 1945. Some historians are also doubtful that the 332nd were able to sink a German destroyer using only gunfire, as while the mission report for June 25, 1944 does indicate that a team of 8, not 2, 8. Aircraft sunk a destroyer off the coast of Italy, the only ship that was operating in the area at that time. The Italian destroyer, Giuseppe Missouri, remained in operation until the war ended in 1945. While Red Tails was not very popular when it first came out in 2012, as a historical film, it's arguably even worse, as it spends far too much time focusing on people that didn't exist and events that either didn't happen or were purposely altered to be more exciting. While the film isn't completely without merit, as it does manage to convey a fairly realistic depiction of the racism and discrimination that existed in the armed forces during this period, it probably shouldn't be your primary source for learning about the Tuskegee Airmen. If you do want to learn more about the Tuskegee Airmen, then feel free to check out any of the sources I have listed at the end of this video. As always, I'm Silver Jade, asking you to please remember to support your local library. I definitely would not have been able to make this video without them, and I hope to see you all next time.